Okay, last Monday. Wow, that's been a whole week ago. Last Monday, we started on section 5A. We're actually leaving budget and financing and all that stuff. Headed into the second part of what this class is about, statistics, understanding probabilities, understanding statistical studies. The intent of this class is not to get you ready to do big research projects. Okay? The idea of this class is to give you some background so that when you hear on the radio, see on the internet, or wherever, some piece of information or some study, or on a commercial, 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. To look past just what they've got there in the headlines to what's really going on beyond that. Part of understanding what's really going on beyond that is understanding how a survey or a study works. I flipped past that first screen because I believe we talked some about that last Monday on how the Nielsen ratings go. Okay. When you want to understand an entire population, in advertising, they're not necessarily concerned about understanding the entire country. Because if, for example, you're advertising a Lincoln Town car, is that a car that's going to be of interest to the vast majority of the people in the country? No. In fact, it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever done it. I've never played golf, but sometimes when we're whipping through the channels, come across them playing golf. Watch the commercials during a golf tournament. You will see a dramatic difference in what is shown there versus the commercials for the Brady Bunch or for whatever else you might be watching. Football. The commercials for football are very different from the commercials for golf. When you're watching football, it's going to be beer, 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 and pickup trucks. Isn't that about it? Okay. Then you flip over to the channel where they've got golf. It's going to be Edwards Investing. It's going to be Lincoln. It's going to be Cadillac. It's going to be BMW. It's going to be some other investment firm. Well, what's the deal? Is it just by accident that those commercials are in those different times? It's by intent because studies done by advertisers have clearly borne out it's a different group of people watching football than are watching a golf tournament. It's a different group of people watching tennis than watching hockey. Okay? When was the last time you saw a fight break out at a tennis tournament? Or even heard of one? Really? Okay. When was the last time you ever heard of a hockey game without a fight? No. You get the point. The entire population of the United States is a group of people. Now, you could treat the population as everybody in the United States. If, however, you are trying to sell Lincoln Town cars or BMWs or Mercedes, do you really want to spend money reaching everybody in the United States? No. How many of you are planning on going out and buying a Mercedes this year? Why not? Aren't they a nice car? What's wrong with Mercedes? The new ones, you just sit in the car and you tell it what to do. Turn on WVXU. Start the car. Find the nearest Starbucks. And on the way, find the place that has the cheapest gas. You just sit there like that, talking, and the car's computing your route, da-da-da, the whole thing. Finding a radio station, da-da-da. Wouldn't you like a car like that? Well, why aren't you going to own one here in the next year or two? Well, you can probably give me about 100,000 reasons why you're not going to own one, right? Okay. So Mercedes isn't interested in advertising to you just yet. Their population is a specific group of people. When you are looking at a specific study, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what is the population they're trying to reach? If it's food, odds are they're trying to reach everybody in the country. If it's just normal food that we're accustomed to. Potato chips or something like that. Everybody eats potato chips at some point. Okay. Coke. Everybody drinks Coke. Then what you want to do is from that population, look at the sample. This is critical. The way a sample is drawn will make or break the study. It'll give you valid results or it'll give you garbage. What winds up happening is with a study, very rarely do you have the time and money to talk to every single person in the population. Often the population is millions of people. And does a P&G have the money to send enough people out that every single person in the U.S. who might buy Pampers gets a personal visit from P&G? That'd cost a fortune, wouldn't it? So what you wind up doing instead is you take a sample. The sample is intended to be reflective of the population. It's a smaller group, but it is intended to reflect the population. Okay? It's a less expensive way to understand what the whole group you're interested in prefers. Okay? Be really careful. Two words that we're going to use, and you don't want to get them mixed up. One is population. That's everybody. Or if we're studying, for example, light bulbs. It's every single light bulb that GE sells or Sylvania sells. A sample is a smaller grouping from that population. So for example, if GE wants to, on the side of their packaging, list how many hours their 100-watt bulb is going to burn, and they do. If you look at light bulbs, when you buy them on the side of the package, it lists what the expected lifespan of that light bulb is. How do they get that number? Well, they take some of them that they have manufactured, take them to a lab, and they run tests on them to figure out how long is this bulb going to last. The idea is you just randomly pull some bulbs off, and there's a specific way for doing that. You test them, see how they behave, and then you associate that behavior with every single light bulb of that particular wattage and style. You do that with people, don't you? No, I'm not prejudiced. I'm not biased. I'm not. Yes, you are. Everybody is. Bias just means you have preferences. Everybody has preferences. Some of them are good preferences. Some are preferences that you probably would prefer to not have. Okay? Let me give you an example of a situation where they were trying to describe a population and the survey was bad. We talked about this the other day. Or I alluded to this the other day. I forget which way it went. 2016 presidential election. Ohio was projected at 7 p.m. at night to support who as president? Clinton. Early on, they projected Ohio is going to Clinton. They projected Pennsylvania is going to Clinton. Now, I can't speak to how the survey was done for Pennsylvania, but in Ohio, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, all the big news networks went out and did their surveys. You've got to get a lot of people, and you got to do it fast, because how much time do you have on election day to make your forecast? A couple hours, right? To get a lot of people, what they did was they went to the 3 C's of Ohio: Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. There's a problem with that, because small town, rural United States has different values same values, they'd be living in the city. So they came back with their early forecasts and said, it's clear that Clinton's got Ohio locked up. Because when they talked to people in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, everybody was rah, 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 Clinton all the way. Who won Ohio? Trump did. How many counties are there in Ohio? 88, you're right. Okay? How many of those counties went Clinton? What's the blue ones? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 out of 88 counties went for Clinton. The other 81 went what direction? Trump. That was a very bad survey because they did not understand what Ohio looks like. A small part of the population in little clusters has one preference. The vast majority of the state has a very different preference, don't they? Okay. Early on, when they gave those suggested forecasts, I said that makes absolutely no sense because we live out on a farm, and after I get past the Lowe's there on Coleraine, it's all country from there on out. The last 25 minutes of my drive is all country. The last 25 minutes, you know how many Clinton signs I passed in 25 minutes of driving? 1. Okay? I could drive almost a half an hour and basically never see a Clinton sign. How many Trump signs? All over the place. And I told Becky, I said, what they're saying makes no sense based on what I've seen. Daniel and I did a ton of driving. He plays travel hockey. We were all over the state. Yes, in the city you would see Clinton, but every place else, you know what we saw? Almost exclusively Trump. I said, these forecasts make no sense. And I found out how they did them, the 3 C's. When you get information from a news source, from an advertiser, from whatever, do not be inclined to just take that information at face value. Okay? What you need to understand is, first off, does that source have a preference? Do the news sources have biases? Yes, they do. Advertisers, do they have biases? Does Ford have a bias? I don't care. You can buy GM, you can buy Dodge, you can buy one of ours. It doesn't make any difference to us. Really? Is that how Ford stays in business? There ain't no way. Does Ford have a bias? Yes, they do. Does Procter & Gamble, when they're selling Pampers, have a bias? Yes, they do. Their very existence depends on that commercial, that survey pointing in their direction. So realize that when you are given this information, it's very likely that there could be a bias in it. Okay? When you are listening to a survey result or on advertising, whatever it might be, you want to pay attention to a couple things. One's the population parameter. It's the specific characteristic about whatever the population is that you want to understand. In the example, we wanted to understand voting age people are going which direction in Ohio. That was the parameter we were interested in. Clinton or Trump, voting age, Ohio. It was pretty narrowed down. The sample statistics, the information, the numbers we're actually going to get are going to come from a sample, not from the population. The population will often be too big to get, too expensive to involve everybody in. So we are going to get information on a smaller number and use the numbers from that group to predict everybody or everything. If Sylvania tested every light bulb they made till it burned out, how many would they have left to sell? You can't test any of them, or all of them, or you don't have anything left to sell. So they have to take a small sample and depend on that sample to describe what all their light bulbs are going to do. Okay, what are some basic steps in a study? And one of these steps we're going to pretty well skip in this class. First thing you want to do is make sure that the study has a specific goal. It's something that can be measured. Something that can be measured is, what is the lifespan of a light bulb? Can you tell when a light bulb is burned out? That's pretty easy to measure, right? Here's a different one. What percent of people in Blue Ash are happy? How do you measure happy? Yeah, well, good luck with that one. Happy to different people is different things, isn't it? So the first thing you want to make sure of in the study is that it's something that can be precisely stated and measured. If it isn't, okay, you can go on and look at what everything is that comes after that, but realize that, you know, where we started was not a real easy thing to even define. So everything that follows might be kind of tough to really understand. Second thing, in this study, does the sample really represent the population? If we want to look at the average height and weight of college-age men, and we only study the football team, is that going to be a representative sample of the average weight and height of college-age men? Not so much, right? They're going to be a little taller and a little bit heavier, right? So you have to consider the population and compare that to the sample, and does the sample really make sense? This section, right here, collect the data, okay, from the sample. That's easy enough to do, or in some way can be done. But here comes the part that we're going to skip. Summarize the data. What statistics are really about is taking a group of numbers and organizing and studying those numbers, looking for a pattern. Is there a pattern to be spotted in these numbers? Or are the numbers just kind of spread all over the place? Okay. If I take this herbal tea, will I get over a cold in 4 days instead of 7? Or are the recovery days 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days? Are they spread all over the place, or is everybody at 4 days? What the statistical analysis does is it looks for a pattern, and catch this, it tells you how likely is it that that pattern is not an accident. Is it possible to flip 5 tails in a row? Can that happen? Sure. Is that an unusual pattern? Yeah, I would expect a head there somewhere, but it can be the case that you flip 5 tails in a row. Does that mean you're always going to get 5 tails in a row? No, it just meant that that was an unusual pattern. It happens 1 or 2% of the time. The other 98 or 99% of the time, you get a head in there somewhere. The second thing that happens with statistics is it tells you how likely is this pattern legitimate. When you come back with a p-value of 0.01, that means that 99% of the time you'll get this pattern. Does that mean that the pattern is legit? Yeah, it looks like it. If 99 times out of 100 this is what happens, that's pretty legit. Okay. If 99 times out of 100 when you walk past Uncle Hermie, he smacks you upside the head, what are you going to do when Uncle Hermie walks by? Right? Because 99 times out of 100, he whaps you upside the head. It's a pretty good pattern. You can pretty well guess what Uncle Hermie's going to do. The point of the statistics is to look for a pattern and tell you how likely is it that that pattern really is a pattern and not just something that happened by accident. How you do that using multivariate analysis, t-tests, or whatever, we're not going to worry about that part. That's for another class to deal with. Okay? But I want you to understand that the probability that we get back tells you what's the likelihood that the pattern that is spotted is legit. Then what they do is they use the sample statistics to make some comment about the population. Light bulbs. You pull 100 of them off the line from that day's production. 100 of them out of 10,000. And out of the 100, 99% of them burn at least 2,000 hours. What are you going to say about the 10,000 light bulbs overall as far as how long they'll burn? We're pretty confident these things are going to burn at least 2,000 hours. Okay? And that's what the sample statistic does. It tells you something about the whole population of light bulbs. Does that make sense? The only thing you're going to skip here is how do you summarize the data, the statistics, the actual number crunchy part of it. That's for another class. Does this make sense what we're after with every study or with anything that you're presented in the way of information? Okay. One of the things that you need to be aware of in studies is there are different definitions for situations. Are you happy? Well, I'm not crying. Yeah, are you happy? I'm content. Different people will answer yes to happy in different ways. They interpret happy differently, don't they? There are other things that are interpreted differently. Did you know the unemployment rate has about 12 different definitions defined by the federal government, not just people in general? The Bureau of Labor Studies, the Bureau of Labor, I saw the word studies up there too. The Bureau of Labor has about 12 different definitions for unemployed. So when they come out with unemployment rates, the first question I have is how are they defining unemployment? Unemployment by some definitions means you've got no work. Nothing. Other definitions of unemployment include things like you only work 8 hours a week. And realistically, if you only work 8 hours a week, are you really getting it done? You're hungry. And as far as you're concerned, you need a job. And if you need a job, you are unemployed or underemployed. Underemployed is one view of unemployment. And that's important to know. Because sometimes, depending on the administration, they'll mess with which definition is being used to make their administration look better or worse. Under the previous administration, unemployment rates were ridiculously high. Minority groups got slaughtered. Okay? For African American teenage males, the unemployment rate was way over 50%. That's ridiculous. Okay? And it had to do with policies that were being implemented. But to make it look better, they changed unemployment to different definitions so it wasn't quite as bad. Under the current administration, what's unemployment like now? It's about the same, isn't it? Okay. For minority groups, it's the lowest unemployment rate ever in the history of the country. Whichever minority group you want to pick, it's the lowest it's ever been. Those folks who 6 years ago couldn't get a job, you can go out and find 2 or 3. It's because of differences in policies. Okay? So you've got to watch how things are defined because groups have preferences, they have biases, they have intentions and reasons for the way they're doing things. Okay, choosing your sample. Here's something you're going to have to be careful of when you look at a study. Is the sample legit? Is it possible to pick a sample that really isn't reflective of what's going on? Yeah. Let's talk about prostate cancer. And I go out and I interview 500 women, and none of them have had prostate cancer. Wow. Apparently that's not a problem anymore. Is it a relevant sample? What's wrong with my sample? That's not equipment that women have. Okay? So can any of them even get prostate cancer? No, they don't even have those parts. Okay? You got to make sure the sample is relevant to what's being studied. Kind of a silly example, but there it is. Now, when you go to sampling, and this is important, we're going to list 4 different types of samples here. Ooh, that sounds like a good question for Friday's quiz. List 4 different common sampling techniques. Are these all of the techniques for sampling? Nope. These are 4 common ones, typically used. One is a simple random sample. Okay? For example, we're interested in blue ash. Will the school levy be approved for Sycamore City schools? Well, what we need to do is we need to talk to voter-aged residents of Blue Ash. Why don't we want to include people from Cleveland? Do they get to vote on the Blue Ash school levy? No. They're irrelevant. So when we do our simple random study, what we're going to do, a way to do it, is to have a list of all the voter-aged residents of Blue Ash. And either you, by throwing darts at it, or just randomly picking some folks, or letting the computer randomly generate numbers, and you pick that number on the list, somehow randomly select a group of people from the entire list of voter-aged residents of Blue Ash. That's a simple random sample. Everybody is equally likely to be picked, aren't they? Okay. Second type of sampling technique is a systematic sample. And I explained an example of this earlier. Sylvania wants to understand how their light bulbs are doing. So you stand there right by the machine where they package the light bulbs, and before the light bulbs go in, every 1,000th light bulb you pull off the line, you put on a cart, and you take it back to a lab where it's tested. Every 1,000th. Oh, there goes another one. Oh, there goes another one. Every 1,000th comes off the line and gets tested. That is a systematic way of doing a sample. Systematic because it's every 1,001. You can do that with people, you can do that with products, all kinds of stuff. So a second way to choose is just going after every 1,000th or whatever. Third way is what is called a convenience sample. If we wanted to understand how well UCBA is serving you as students, how's the food? Is the math lab useful? Is the science lab useful? How's the one-stop? Okay. Is there enough place around here to study? Or the folks at the library? You know, there are all kinds of questions that would be of interest. And how can we go about getting answers or feedback? Well, the dean's office may go over to the one-stop and say, give me the names of every 100th person on the list of full-time students. That would be a systematic study, wouldn't it? Or a systematic sample, because it's every 100th person. They could say, hey, just at random, pull 100 names off of the list of students. That would be a simple random study. Another way the study could be done is they just grab their clipboard and they walk into some classes. They come walking in and say, hey, need to talk to each of you, fill out this survey about how things are going here. That's a convenience survey. You just catch a group of people where you can and get their opinions. Okay. There are advantages and disadvantages to each of these. One of the advantages to this is it's easy to do. It's inexpensive to do. And if money's a problem, this is a way to do it. But realize that if You do it like this, are you going to have the most representative sample of your population? Probably not. A better way to do a sample is what is called a stratified sample. Stratified comes from the word strata. It's Latin. It means it has layers. There are different layers. In society, are there different layers? Well, there's a lot of different ways to get different layers, aren't there? You could define it ethnically, you could define it by age, you could define it by interest. There are all kinds of ways to get different layers in society. Okay. Let's do something a little different. We want to compare cars from Ford, GM, and Dodge and decide who makes the best cars. Well, one of the first things you need to do is decide how are we going to define best. Okay, well, under best, we're going to do, here, I'll list it here. Under best, we're going to look for a couple of things. Best is going to include reliability, it's going to include fit and finish. What is fit and finish? Drives me nuts. I don't know if you've ever walked up to a car and really looked at them. You've got two body panels that come up to each other, and there's always a little gap between them in there to allow for movement as the car is bending and flexing down the road. On some cars, that gap is exactly the same distance, the entire length of that panel mating surface. On other cars, it's in and out. Really, if you can't build them any better than that, I wonder what's going on where I can't see. Okay. Fit and finish would be another one. Maybe economy. Comfort. So you could list various characteristics that you're going to look at. Now, if we're going to do a stratified sample, and we're going to be trying to compare Ford to Dodge to GM, does Ford make different types of cars? Yeah. Does Dodge? Yeah. Does GM? They sure do. Okay. They all make some that are economy class. They all make their minivans. Okay. They all make their, well, I got a whole list of stuff here, their SUVs. They all make their sports cars. They all make their lightweight trucks. Those are the pickup trucks you're used to seeing running around. Okay, and on down the list, right on down to luxury. So what you would need to do if you were going to be doing a study to decide who makes the best cars as a fleet is you would first take the cars from Ford, break them up into these various categories. And then for each category, rate them according to the different characteristics that you're looking at. Get a rating for their economy cars. Then go to their minivans. Rate them for those same characteristics. You get the idea. And what this does is it gives you a variety of layers of cars. Okay? Because comparing a Cadillac to a Ford Fiesta is not exactly fair, is it? I mean, the Fiesta's got it all over the Cadillac. Gets over 40 miles to the gallon. Well, that wasn't the characteristic I was thinking about, Chuck. Okay, yeah, that's why they got all these. Okay, and you got to compare like to like. The idea of a stratified sample is to identify the various subgroups, and then within each subgroup. So, for example, within the economy class, you draw a simple random sample of cars coming off the line. From the minivans, you do a simple random sample and you pull those cars off to the side for your study. And write down through every single classification or strata of vehicle that you're studying. You've got to be careful when you're doing studies because there are biases. We all have biases. There are people you wouldn't date. What's wrong with them? Got 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. I mean, what's wrong? don't fit. It just isn't right. Okay? We all have biases. And when you do or are looking at a study, you've got to be aware of biases in the way the sample is done, in the way things are accomplished. As an example, if we were going to talk to people about unemployment in the community, is unemployment bad? And you went to McDonald's, okay, is the unemployment rate higher than it should be? If you went to McDonald's on a Monday through Friday at 9:30 in the morning, is that a good time to be there getting a sample to find out if people have a job? No, because who's the only people there at 9:30 on Monday through Friday morning? People who don't have a job, right? So it produces a bias based on the way you've set up your sample. Okay? Hey, you can start doing the homework in section 5A. I've got it up. You can start reading through section 5A in the book. This stuff is very readable. Okay? I'll see you all on Wednesday. Okay? I'm sorry? I did not bring one today. Yeah, no attendance sheet today.